Welcome to the She Ventures podcast, dedicated to inspiring women to unleash their untapped potential across work, life, and beyond. We bring you stories and inspiration from around the world, across fields and industries, and ones that nourish the mind, body, and soul. Hosted by Georgina Miranda, founder and CEO of She Ventures. Thanks for joining.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our She Ventures podcast. My name is Georgina Miranda, and I'm the CEO and founder of She Ventures. And today I am thrilled to have Sandra Velasquez from Nopalera with us to share a little bit more about her founder story, how she got started, and about this amazing company and brand that she has built over the last couple of years. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you so much for that lovely intro. It's good to be here.
I'm sure people are listening now and already wondering what Nopalera is. So maybe let's start there. Tell us about
it's a good
Nopalera.
place to start. Yeah, so Nopalera is a Mexican botanical bath and body brand. So we make things for, below the neck. So soaps and scrubs and body moisturizers, all made with nopal, otherwise known as prickly pear cactus. And it's a very culture forward brand. We celebrate and elevate Latino culture and inspire our community to stand in our worth.
Amazing. And today, where could people find Nopalera besides your website?
Yeah, so you can find us we're in over 400 boutiques across the country. So I can't even keep track of the list. But I think we're in every state except for the Dakotas. So probably find us at your local boutique. And if not there, then at Credo Beauty, also Nordstrom, and also Free People Movement. And that's where we are right now.
Well, that's incredible because you're a relatively young brand and business, right? So tell us a little bit about the founder journey from that first maybe point of inspiration to the actual going from ideation to doing something with that to launch and where you are today.
Yeah, well, oddly enough, I had the idea when I was unemployed, which I think is important to highlight because I realized I learned something about myself, which is that I need time to have new ideas. And so it makes sense that I had the idea when I actually had time, right? Because I wasn't employed, which is also kind of scary. But what it allowed me to do is to ideate and to dream and to think of other things, other possibilities. And so it was the summer of 2019. I was 43. I was unemployed. I had a child, I had student loans, personal credit card. So, was not in a financial place to be starting a business. But I knew that the only way to actually change all of that, to change my life, to be able to provide for my daughter, was to become an entrepreneur. And I felt like, wow, everything I had done up until that point in my life had led me to this moment where it was time. I felt equipped. I felt I knew how to do it. I mean, there's still a lot I didn't know how to do, but I knew the basics. I knew the fundamentals, the really importance of building a brand. Obviously, I didn't have the capital to do it. So I invested in myself. I enrolled in formulation school because I was a beauty industry outsider. So I didn't know how to find a manufacturer. I spent my whole adult life as a musician. I was a lead singer of a Latin alternative band.
Amazing. So I was going to ask you, what was the work that you were doing that you got laid off from, just to give viewers a perspective as to how it all ties together, or it doesn't, which is fine if it doesn't.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I live in New York, so it's very expensive. So you have to have 5 jobs when you live here. And so I have always been a musician my entire life. And I actually moved to New York from Southern California to build my music career, which I did. But as a day job for insurance and all of that, I always had a job. So the last thing I was doing was working in CPG. So I was working for food and beverage brands in sales. And that's really where I understood what it really took to build a brand, the importance of building a company, all of the back end, the margins and all of that. But again, I was coming from food and beverage. So I didn't really have any context in beauty. I invested in myself, enrolled in formulation school, learned how to make product. And I knew that I wanted to launch a high-end Latina beauty brand. I didn't know what the products were going to be. I thought I was going to make a skincare brand, honestly.
Okay.
And when I decided on Bath and Body, which I'm so grateful for because there's such a bigger opportunity there. Skincare is very saturated and competitive. I mean, everything's competitive, but skincare is extremely oversaturated. And the first person I called was my designer because I knew that the branding was going to make or break it. But again, had no money to pay for branding. So what did I do? I asked for a payment plan and I used my American Express card. And I really built, literally payment by payment. That's how I built this brand for a year until I launched. And then it worked, right? All of those early foundational investments in myself, right? In the branding, in actually building in the quiet. You have to have the ability to build in the quiet when like no one cares, there's no applause, there's no revenue, and really build the foundation. I really looked at it like I was building a religion. What do we stand for? What is the mission? Who are we talking to? Why do they care? All of those things, answering all of those hard questions early on is what allowed me to build a strong brand, so that when I launched, it was like a magnet. It just attracted people immediately.
And let's go back to the mindset piece of this, right? Because I think that's really important for people to understand that you were laid off, and you acknowledge that that was scary, right? And here you're making an investment in something that's not guaranteed versus taking care of maybe the, survival piece. And I'm an entrepreneur as well. I've had the ups and downs. We're self-funded. Sometimes when I always say survival mode is kind of like the worst place for creativity, because you really have to shift your mind to look beyond that place of survival.
Yeah.
So were there any practices or rituals or things you had already in your own personal toolkit to allow yourself to dream despite the current circumstance and be able to see beyond them?
Yeah, honestly, I can't say that at that time I had any practices in place. I do now, but at the time I really felt like I felt like my back was up against the wall, and I felt like the only way to change this direction is me. Like, it's not going to be an outside source. It's not going to be another job that doesn't pay me enough. It's not going to be because, I don't know, I got another music licensing deal that, those things that you can't control. Like, what I could control were my own actions. And if you want different results, you have to take different actions. And so it was scary, right? You're investing your money that you don't have, right? I'm using my credit card. I already had credit card debt. By no means would any financial person be like, yeah, that's a good idea. You should spend more money, right? That you don't have. But I knew that it was the only way. And so I'm grateful for that time, as kind of scary as it was, because it felt, I felt actually in control. It's odd. It's odd because you're like, I'm unemployed, but I actually felt in control because I knew that I could take different acts to get different.
Yeah, and that's so very true, right? We are the captains of our own destiny. It doesn't feel like it sometimes when life pulls a rug under our feet, but we do have that choice, right? To make different decisions to drive change. And so you shared with me before we jumped on this podcast that very exciting news. You just closed your seed round. You actually oversubscribed. And so take us from this point of you're putting things on your credit card to you finally get the product out there. Was that piece all bootstrapped? Like, at what point did that shift occur with the fundraising? And, big congratulations to you, because the amount of women that get venture funding is low. It's still below 3% globally. Women of color, even less. Like, we're looking less than 2%, less than 1% in some cases, right? And it fluctuates year on year, but it's a very small margin. So take us through that journey.
Yeah. Also, one of the hardest things I've ever done. If you think launching in a pandemic with no money is hard, just try raising capital for the first time. All of it has been a huge learning experience, a big learning curve. I was learning as I went. I'm really hopeful that the next time I go to raise money, it's going to be a little easier because I have a roster of investors now. I know how it works. But everything that I've done from the time of launching till now, I have done it for the first time. So it's a huge learning curve. And I didn't know any manufacturers or how to find a co-packer or anything when I was launching. I also didn't know how to find investors. I didn't like, how do I find these people? Who are they? Where are they? And I enrolled in every single accelerator or cohort that I could, and I got into all of them. And that is where I met my first investors. I mean, not the ones that actually invested in me, but that's where I met the first people that were venture capitalists that could then introduce me to other people. Because the thing to know about, VCs or just people with money in general is that they know other people with money. So once you meet one, you meet three. So you have to be willing to ask for introductions, or is there anyone else that that might be interested, like those types of things. And that's how I built the network. But it was, again, one person at a time. And it was very difficult to be raising money when you are running out of money, because you have to come with this big money energy to the pitch, presentation. And you can't be desperate, right? You have to be willing to say no to people when there's not alignment, when maybe, their money is not the right money,
Yes. And so you signed up for all these accelerators. I've seen that you've won a lot of the competition. So is that how a lot of the investment came through? Was through the competitions, as you shared? Or was there like the next phase where you're like actually going and pitching investors and going through that formal process?
Yeah. So no, I didn't. None of the people that invested in me were from the pitch competitions per se, but from those pitch competitions, I met other investors, right? So it's like you have to just meet more people that then leads to more people that leads to more people.
Yeah.
And ultimately all of those pitch wins, it was a really momentous year, right? Won, 4 different pitch competitions, and one startup, Latino startup of the year at the Latitude conference in September. But all of these pitch competitions were really just fuel for the fire while I was raising money, because it's a great story to be able to tell prospective investors, like, listen, we have momentum. I just won yet another pitch competition. Hey, I just won another one, so I actually just used it as fuel for the fire.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so when you first launched the product, when you went live, was that all bootstrap?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first 3 years were completely bootstrapped. So I say we've only been alive for 2 years, but really, when I say 3, I'm talking about that year of me building when nobody knew who I was, right? Because I started in 2019. I didn't launch until 2020. So for a whole year, it was just me building and spending, and then we launched and it was just me, doing everything. And when I say me doing everything, I mean, I was making the product, right? So I was the manufacturer. I was making the soap in my Brooklyn apartment. Eventually I grew out of my kitchen and I had to rent a space in my neighborhood. And then I had to hire 2 assistants. So I was running a soap factory, and my boyfriend was my shipping manager and my inventory manager. And it was hard, right? Because at that time I had to get another job, right, in between. So of course I was working, and I was actually working 3 jobs. I was working as a, sales rep for Van Leeuwen ice cream. I was working as a sales rep for High Bar. And I was also teaching a CPG class at night. So it's like one job was to pay the rent, one job was to pay the debt, and then one job was to fuel the brand, the new brand. And it was tough. But I knew that it was a means to an end. Like I knew like it wasn't going to last forever that way. It was just to get me to the point where the brand had legs and took off, and then I could, quit the day jobs, which I was able to do, 6 months in.
Right.
But all completely bootstrapped. Again, my American Express card, and then little working capital loans, because Shopify Capital, once they see you have sales, they reach out and they offer, you money. So that was helpful. And eventually those become too small, right? Like $30,000, $50,000 sounds like a lot of money when it's just you, but eventually you need to hire people, and it's just not enough. So that's when I realized like, I'm going to have to raise real outside capital. But I put it off for as long as possible.
Yeah. And you're having to buy the materials and ship these products and all that. And, for anyone that's trying to approach wholesalers, retailers, there's also a margin that they're not paying you full retail value, right? So there's quite a significant cut in that margin.
Yeah.
And payment terms and things that don't necessarily pay you up front.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to have enough to deliver the product before you actually get paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when did you make it into your first retailer? What year was that?
It was right away, actually.
Right away?
Yeah. So I was, I started advertising like maybe 4 months prior to launch, because I wanted to build an email list of people to launch to, so that when the website turned on and went live, I could tell the people that had been paying attention, hey, we're live. So right away, we started getting inquiries for wholesalers. And I was surprised because I, as a former sales rep, was ready to go chase them down and try to pitch them and try to get into them. But what's actually transpired was a really nice surprise, because I was advertising to our D2C channel. Those boutiques were seeing those same ads. And so they started to reach out. Hey, do you wholesale? And so we had, I think our first wholesale order was like in the first week of our launch. The website went live, and then people started to reach out, wanting to, other, boutiques started to reach out to want the product. And then we launched into Nordstrom at the end of 2021. So September 2021. So the end of the first full year, but we ended that first year with like 200 boutiques.
It's incredible. And again, this is all happening during the pandemic.
Yes.
and somehow you're able to work miracles, which I think is really also a testimony to your mindset. And we'll keep going there, right? Because I always tell people you have to believe before you can see.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're already kind of shot yourself in the foot before you even got started. You have to have that confidence, right? In your product and yourself and what you're building, and that people will come.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the power of storytelling, the
Mm.
cultural significance of the brand, because you've done such an amazing job to bring that all to life. And as you said, you knew that you had to get that straight right away. And sometimes it's always interesting with businesses. Sometimes they focus so much on the business and the brand becomes an afterthought, or it's something that they later realize they need to work on. And it sounds like for you, that was the first thought. That's really, really where you started. And so maybe tell us a little bit about that and how that helped you potentially, get the interest of these retailers so quickly and things like that, and your direct to consumer business too.
Yeah, I think that the brand is everything. And again, to clarify, when I say the brand, we're not talking about the logo, right? We're
Exactly.
talking about what does it stand for. And
Yes.
you look at the big brands that are successful, like Nike. Nike is not selling shoes.
Right.
Nike is not a shoe company, right? They are
Yeah.
selling excellence. So really think about what it is that you're selling. And I sat down to build my brand like I was literally starting a new religion. Like, what are our 10 commandments? What are the things that we believe in, right? Why do we exist? Why are people going to care? Who are we making this for? Why do they care? And answering those questions, if you can answer those questions in the beginning, it's going to be so much easier of a ride, right? Because what I see, especially as someone that was a CPG consultant and has mentored other brands and other founders, is that a lot of founders in this category specifically, and in food and bev too, in CPG in general, people are building out of passion. Like, I love my cookie recipe. I love to make skincare. I love my grandmother's recipe, right? And so they're building out of this passionate place, but you have to, it's not about you. The brand is not you. So
No.
the brand, it's an extension of your values, but people are not buying it because of you. They're buying it because they see themselves in the brand. Right? It's about them. So answering those questions about why do people care in the beginning, if you can answer that, then you're on the right track, and also building a brand with a strong mission that stands for something. I think those are the brands that survive and that thrive and survive and that last, because a lot of brands are trying to sell ingredients or they're trying to sell a product, and an ingredient or a product is not a purpose. So what is your purpose? What is the mission here? What are you really trying to accomplish? What is the impact you're really trying to have? And answering those questions. So I did all of that work in the beginning. I mean, I wrote it out, right? I wrote it out, and like I was writing a Bible.
You're making me so happy because I help a lot of people with this process. And sometimes they come to me when they've already had a business. They come to us like they've already had the business several years. And I'm like, okay, we have to go back to why you started.
Yes.
And bring that to life.
Yes.
Through everything you're doing.
Yes.
And so tell us the why behind everything you do. And you shared with us when you started a little bit.
Yeah.
But tell us your bigger why and how you want people to feel when they're having any experience with Nopalera.
Yes. And I think that question that you just asked is one of the questions that you should ask yourself. Anyone that's going to build a brand, ask yourself, how is it that you want people to feel when they interact with your brand, when they look at it, when they buy it, when it's at their house, answering that question and working backwards. Because that's what I did. I really began with the end in mind. I decided what the end game was. Like, I want to build a high-end Latina brand that's going to sit on the shelves of Barney's. Like, those were my actual words to my designer. And then I worked backwards, right? Like, so if you decide on your destination and then you work backwards, it's so much easier, right? It's still hard, but it's so much easier than building frontwards to like from where you are to forwards, because it informs your branding. It informs your marketing strategy, your pricing, right? If I had come out and said, I want to build a brand, a Latina brand that's going to sell at Target, it's going to be a different price point. Yeah. It's going to have to be, because they're selling to a different consumer with a different proposition, right? It's all about value, right? And so I did not do that. I said, I'm going to build a high-end Latina brand that's going to compete with other premium brands that are historically, European, or Western European, French and Italian names. So when you ask me, what is the real mission is I can say it a couple different ways. The easy way to say it is like, we're positioning Latina as luxury in the clean beauty space. Another way to say it is that we are decolonizing the bath and body industry, which has been historically Eurocentric. And, that's like the more aggressive way to say it, right? But really it's the same, right? It's really, for me, it's the same. And what I want to do is I want to normalize Latina product being premium, because until people stop asking for Mexican products to be cheaper, like, our mission has not been completed. Because in the beauty industry and in this country in general, it's so Eurocentric. I mean, colonialism touches all parts of our lives, including beauty. And we have been conditioned to aspire to these Western European brands with French and Italian names. The more French it is, the harder it is to say like the more aspirational it is, like the higher the price tag, right? L'Occitane, you know, like people don't even know how to say L'Occitane, but they're like, oh, but it's French, so it must be, you know, high end, it must be expensive. But how many French people actually live in this country, Georgina, compared to how many Latinos live here?
Right.
No sense.
Yeah.
Right?
And you could look at this also from like a global perspective too, right? Because I love traveling is a big part of my life. Exploring is a big part of my life. And I could think of going to major airports in Latin America or anywhere else. And again, or people coming to the US for shopping for anything else. And what brands are they gravitating towards? You know, what are they trying to shop for? It's all of this, like there's certain things that deem luxury versus not.
Yes.
And it ties back to a lot of things. I think this topic's really deep rooted, right?
Yeah.
If you look at wages for Latinas
Mm-hmm.
overall,
Mm-hmm.
we're the lowest paid.
Yeah.
And so there is something associated with what we're worth. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really beautiful that that is part of the mission of,
Yes.
you know, because I think it helps elevate any Latina that's interfacing with the brand, her own value too,
Yeah.
and a reminder of you're worth all of this.
Yes.
Like, you know, you're worth it.
Yes.
So yeah, so how have those conversations gone with, I'm curious, with retailers and things like that, you know, because you are having to have these conversations, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
share why you're
And
different.
I think some people get it and some people, you know, it's so interesting because the colonialism is so deep. It's even ingrained in Latinos, right? Where they are like, oh, do Latinos really buy this? Like, is it, or is it just for white people, right? Like this assumption that somehow Latinos don't have money or Latinos only want to buy low priced products or we all want a deal. Like that mentality is also ingrained in our own community, you know? And so that's really interesting. I think that, you know, when I created this brand, I was like, I'm going to make it so irresistibly beautiful that you're going to want it regardless. So like the fact that it's, you know, promoting culture and that it's Latina owned is almost like the bonus, because you're just going to want to pick it up because it's beautiful. And that's how we're going to win people over. And then that's how we normalize Latina being beautiful and luxurious and aspirational. And so some retailers are definitely getting it. We're definitely in the moment in history right now where retailers are waking up to the fact that Latinas over-index in this category. We spend a lot of money on beauty, and they have the stats. They know that Latinas are shopping at, you know, Sephora and Ulta. So it's not just in our heads, right? It's actually already been there. It's just there hasn't been a brand to actually speak to that demographic in that space. So I think that timing is everything. You know, had I started this brand 10 years ago, would the world have been ready? I don't think so. I think
I mean, I think I love that timing is everything. And it's also just important, this topic of working with so many amazing female founders for so many years and seeing, again, the low percentage of investment that goes to women, sometimes specifically women's products and things like this. It's, if you look at purchase power, let's just talk about that a little bit, right? Women hold the largest purchase power globally, wherever you look. And so it doesn't really make sense that the investment doesn't go there to that space. And then specifically in the US, the Hispanic Latino market is the fastest growing. It's huge. And so the purchase power there as well is huge. And it's going to take people like you, like me, and others to, you know, help others see and recognize that they're missing out. Big. I always tell people, I'm like, you're missing out, you know, and I think it also creates space for other diverse communities and other diverse founders also to have seats at the table, because I do believe in the collaboration over the competition. You know, together we shape a different new world.
Yes, absolutely. We change the narrative.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. And I hope that any of our listeners or viewers are, you know, thinking about the programming that we might have, right? That comes through us generationally, that some of it isn't ours. And, you know, I don't know what your family background is. I know from my case, you know, I'm definitely creating a new narrative for my family.
Yes.
And sometimes it comes with guilt. Like, I can do things that my family couldn't do.
Yes.
And these are things I constantly have to work towards. Like,
yes.
You know, like, but it's not bad. Like, you're not a bad person. Don't have shame that you can partake in life in a different way that your family didn't. Like, have gratitude for everything they did so that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, you just take the baton and you take it further, right? We don't have to feel guilty about out earning our parents, or that we have, you know, somehow made more money, or that we have money, right? And that's something that I have learned a lot from these last 2 years, is there is a sentiment within our community of, somehow, I call it the Jenny from the block syndrome, where it's like, don't forget where you came from. In order to stay close to your roots and to your culture, you somehow have to stay economically down as well. And I just completely reject that. And I believe that everything that my grandparents and my parents have done to get me to this point is for me to go even further, and to uplift other people along the way, which is, part of our mission as well. So it's interesting, right? That a lot of times what holds us back is our own narrative in our head.
It's ourselves, most definitely. And we have the power, if we want, to help shift generationally for our communities going forward. And that, I think, is beauty in all of this. And it comes with a lot of hard work. You just shared all the challenges, and you haven't really shared all of them yet. I'm going to get to that in a bit. But, it's not been an easy road for you in any which way, and taken a lot of determination and resilience. And you are quoted in saying, resiliencia es belleza.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that. What does that mean to you? How does that translate now into your work, your brand, your products, everything?
So resilience is beauty, resiliencia es belleza is really an homage to the nopal, because the nopal is extremely resilient. It's, it's been around forever. It needs nothing. It needs just sun, and for you to leave it alone. You cut it, it grows back. It's just so, this is why I'm obsessed. And I think it's like a metaphor for us as a community, as a culture, that we've always been here and we've just been overlooked. We've been taken for granted, but we're not going anywhere, and we're extremely resilient. And so just that's where that came from, is just, the plant that has inspired this entire brand is one of the most resilient crops. It's actually, people call it the crop of the future because it's drought resistant. It's everything resistant. It grows everywhere. You can eat it. You can sustain yourself with it. You can also, use it for your, your hair and skin. So that's where the resilience is beauty comes from.
I love it. And tell us some of the amazing benefits of this plant and what it does for your being and things like that for people that don't know, because they might not be familiar with it.
I know. I'm always surprised when people don't know, because, all Mexican people grew up with nopales. And if you live in the Southwest or on the West Coast, they're everywhere. It's historically been used as a food. So it's amazing for your health. It's amazing for your digestion. It's low glycemic. So people that have diabetes or, those types of issues, it's great for that. It's, we historically cut it up, like you boil it, you cut it up into salads. Obviously you remove the spikes first.
Right.
And then, the way that it's prepared is, ensalada de nopal, which is really just a salad. It has the texture of like a green bean. So that's kind of the only thing I can explain to people if they've never eaten it before. And then you have it with, tomato and onion and cilantro. And so it's usually used like that in a salad. Also, people put it in smoothies. You can also grill it and put it in tacos. So it's kind of endless how you can eat it, but it's so good for you. So it's absolutely great for your health. And for the same reasons that it's good for your health to eat, it's also good to topically. So packed with vitamins and minerals, antioxidant properties. It soothes the skin, it cleanses the skin. And, similar to how aloe vera is used a lot in beauty, I was just surprised that people don't use nopal as often, because it's actually more regenerative. Again, you cut off a penca and a new one grows back in a couple of weeks. My parents have, a nopalera in their front yard, and they just keep cutting from the same places, and they eat them, and then new ones keep growing back. I mean, it's like free food. It's amazing.
Incredible. Well, so thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And speaking of self-care, and so you've created a product that's good for your, it's good topically.
Yeah.
And it's good for your self-care. It's something that's nice to enjoy in that practice. Let's talk about your self-care as a founder, because this is not an easy road. Yeah. And maybe it ties to that resilience piece too. So what are some of those things for you now that have become important? You're also a parent and a business owner and a leader. And so take us through that.
I try to keep my mornings to myself. So no meetings before 10 a.m. I also try to have no meetings on Fridays. I, as the leader of the company, need time to think and to plan, because I always need to be like a year ahead of everyone else. And so giving myself that time is really important. I do sleep well. So like, I don't skimp on sleep. I'm not one of those people that like, oh, I stayed up all night working. Absolutely not. No, I definitely always sleep. And I've gotten better about eating breakfast every day so that I start the day correctly, because I did notice that if I don't, I just crash and burn. My brain's not working. So honestly, like basic things, and then going to sleep, with, in a positive way, like with a gratitude practice. I do a lot of like visualizing and meditating. So that is something that I do have a practice of. And that keeps me focused and on track, because it's really easy to get distracted by what is that person doing? What is this brand doing? What are all the things that could go wrong? And so just that's how I made it through this fundraise, was constantly visualizing the money's already in the bank. It's already ours. Like, we've already done it. So I do a lot of that. And that is very helpful. And then I really love to travel. So anytime I can get away, I need nature. Like, I need nature. I need to be in it. I need to stare out into a view. And because I live in New York City, it's even more important that I get to nature.
Totally understand that. I get really grouchy if I am away from nature too long. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that with us, because it is really easy to get sucked into the work and let these things skip. And then you actually, some people think they're going to be more productive, but they're not, because you need to nourish your soul just as much, and your mind and your body just as much as anything else, as you need to nourish your business. So as we kind of wrap things up, share with us a little bit more of like your intentions for you planning ahead. What are some things that are important to you going forward for the company and the brand?
Yeah. I mean, 2023, we're getting better at advanced planning. Also, in the world of retail, like wholesalers, like they're planning a year in advance. So we have to do the same. It takes a lot of time to innovate new products. Like, I don't think normal people, like when I say normal people, I mean people that are not, founders of product-based businesses. Right. They're always like, oh, when can you come out with a new product? And we're like, well, it takes like over a year to innovate product. So we're currently in R&D for new product, and gonna really, honestly, the focus of 2023 is to grow, but also to preserve cash, so that we make it through the recession and we don't have to raise capital until like the end of 2024, hopefully. And focusing on, really partnering with a national retailer like a Sephora or an Ulta. So we're in conversations with both of them. We have follow-up meetings set up with them. And that's really the next stage of our business. So that's kind of the big goal, right? Is to really plant the flag into one of these national retailers, and build our national presence there.
Yeah. No, and I think it's so important for product-based businesses to really understand the importance of partnerships, right? You have your community, you've done an excellent job in growing that, but it's also leveraging the communities that other organizations have. So hopefully She Ventures does its little part in sharing your message.
Thank
also.
you.
And we'll be sure to share all of the links to how people can find you and follow you on social and all those good things. As we close, tell us a bit, if you want to share a piece of advice for female founders or Latino founders that you want to leave people with as we close.
I have so many tips and advice to give, but I'll try to. The most important ones are to surround yourself with people who want to see you win. So to surround yourself with other people who are building, who are maybe a couple steps ahead of you, but you have to be around other people who are also building towards great things. Otherwise, you're going to feel out of place, so that's really important, to have a squad, a success squad, a growth squad. And then I would say it's really important to really be clear about your mission and your why, because that's what drives you, especially, as we're heading into this recession. Like, what is the North Star?
Yes.
You really just can't keep your eye off of it, right? It just has to always be there. That's pushing you. And then lastly, this is kind of boring, but it's so true. Like, make sure you have a good bookkeeper.
I love that you said that, because most founders, like, that's not the fun part of the business, right? It's I always say, like, be really mindful about what you're great at, what you're not great at, what you love doing, what you don't like doing. Hire for the things that are important and you don't like doing.
Yeah.
Like a book.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to share your journey with our community, and all the amazing things that you're working on. And we can't wait to see the new products as well. And wishing you so much success as you carry forward. And thank you for being such a beautiful voice for the Latino community as well.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.